into the conversation on this Sunday night. I am joined by a great Sunday panel. Joining me in studio, former Labour councillor Linda Scott. So wonderful to have you here in the man cave, sitting in for Paul here. In Queensland, we've got One Nation Chief of Staff and candidate for Keppel in the upcoming state election, James Ashby. Welcome to the program. And in Melbourne, we have libertarian commentator Christian Abraham. Welcome to you all. Now, the big story in politics for the next few days is going to have to be, I think, the one-year anniversary of the Voice's defeat. What went right? What went wrong? Why did they lose? Linda, let's open up with you. What are your thoughts? You've heard what I had to say about it's still the rancor on the yes side about where it all went wrong for them. What do you think?
Look, books will and have been written on this, haven't they? And, of course, 40% of the nation did vote yes, and we have a history of referendum losses in this country. That's the truth of it, on conservative and progressive sides of politics. So I'm sure that the analysis will continue and that this week, as you say, James, will bring a looking back on this year. I think, if anything, though, we want to look forward, and Australians at the moment in particular, given everything that's going on in the world, giving all the unrest in the Middle East, so many different reasons, Australians want unity. They want to have government that is working hard for them, that is producing clear outcomes in the public interest. And I think that some of these fights and trying to dredge up kind of all this dispute and disagreement, to be honest, belong where they are in the past. So I just hope that the commentary this week, when people look back on the referendum, they look back at where it went, what happened, where the campaigns could have improved, and there's no doubt that campaigns can always be improved, that they do so in the spirit of unity and moving forward together, not in a spirit of division.
Yeah, but of course a little bit of division, James Ashby, is not always a bad thing, because of course division is where you get disagreements and ideas and sparks come out of all of that. But I want to ask you about what Linda's just said here, because if we want to move forward together as a nation, I mean, was it a mistake, do you think, James Ashby, as a political strategist, to waste more than a year of your opening political capital as a new government on this vote, which, no matter what you thought about it, was really divisive?
Well, it was always going to be a distraction for a new government, but the commitment was made, and so Anthony Albanese thought this was the most important thing for Australians to deal with at the time. It wasn't, and that's the reality of it. Look, I agree with Linda, we don't want division in the country, and that's why 60% of the Australian population said no to this. There was too much division that was outlined over that 12 months. I'm glad we had time to flesh this out. I'm glad that we had the conversation, we heard both sides. There was one side that wasn't very honest whatsoever, and that's why they lost. And now we live 12 months on with a problem where Megan Davies still hasn't gotten over this. Anthony Albanese said that, look, whatever the outcome, we'll live by it. But there are people like Megan Davies who live in perpetual victimhood status, and so many other people within the Indigenous community, and white guilt is also playing a big part in this across the country from those on the left side of politics, and that's why we haven't been able to move on. Here in Queensland, the Liberal National Party are as much to blame for passing treaty as what Labor are, and we're now stuck in 3 years of truth-telling inquiries across Queensland, something that can't be unravelled, despite the LNP claiming they've walked back from that position. But the genie's out of the bottle. Well, the rainbow serpent's out of the bottle in this case, and we can't put it back in. And the issue that we've got now is that division is continuing to flourish. We had a Bruce Highway blow-up here just to the south of me a couple of months ago, and they had to do a cultural heritage report before being able to patch it up and reopen it. So the problem is being perpetuated by those still within Labor, still within the left, and I don't see any improvement until we reach a point where people say, enough's enough, let's just move on as Australians, all as one.
Christian, I want to bring you in on the conversation here now, too, because one of the big things we keep hearing about this campaign now from people like Megan Davies is this idea that misinformation was responsible for the Voice falling over, not the fundamental problems with the proposal. Now, my colleague here, Peter Credlin, has a great column today. She has said that if her reporting had been done on the Voice, post a misinformation bill, i.e. if the misinformation bill had passed before, that could not have been possible. And yet she turns out to have been right about an awful lot of the stuff that she wound up revealing here. What do you think, Christian, about this misinformation bill? Is this a reaction to the failure of the Voice and a way to sort of get their own back? Or is this part of a broader kind of thing that we're seeing in Western democracies around the world where they're trying to figure out ways to limit speech in general?
You want to frustrate me or get my blood to boil, James? Bring up misinformation and stifling free speech. It is abhorrent that they are calling 60% of Australians stupid, pretty much, by saying that the reason why the Voice didn't get up was because there was misinformation around. People voted no in the referendum for several reasons, and having healthy conversations about a referendum that could potentially change our constitution was important. And it's important to hear people that you disagree with. And the fact that they have tried to leverage off the Voice into this misinformation keeps me up at night, because we will end up in an Orwellian thought police kind of situation if they are able to get this over the line. And yeah, help us if they do. So yeah, frustrating for me, James, and 60% of Australians voted no in the referendum, and they should listen to that.
And Linda, what's your reaction to some of this misinformation debate here? Because, one of the things that does worry me here is that they say misinformation, but an awful lot of things that have been called misinformation in the past have turned out to be, with the passage of time and with more available evidence, they've been hunches that turned out to be correct. Should the government have a role in policing more of what people say?
Look, I think that Peter Credlin in her article is conflating two very important points. She's arguing that the process she went through, freedom of information, government transparency, government integrity, to uncover documents that were background briefings by departments about the Voice, and she put them to air on this news station, and a government misinformation bill, which is designed to stop absolutely clear lies, false information from being corrected in the public domain. She's conflating those two, what I would argue to be very, very different things. I don't think you'd find many Australians who would think it's acceptable to have in the public domain a statement that black is white and that there not be some mechanism for that information to be corrected. And we're seeing much, much more of that on social media in particular, with very little responsibility from the social media giants, because many of them are not based in Australia. They take, the strong view that they shouldn't be held accountable for the lies on their platforms, and people are being exposed to this. And it's leading to very dangerous behaviours. We've talked about this before, but we've seen in local governments, people are declaring that they're able to become a citizen that's sovereign out of Australia. They don't have to pay their rates. They're doing all these behaviours. They're abusing and being quite violent in some small cases to local government staff with no legal basis, no constitutional basis. They're paying for training to be trained as these kind of groups. It's just completely wrong, right? So we need bodies that can correct very clear misinformation and disinformation.
I don't know. Call me old-fashioned. I think we just need more debate on programs like this to decide, what's true and false. I feel like these are issues which we have for centuries, probably ever since the printing press and new technology, said, we've got a new technology, we've got to regulate it. But hey, let's move on here, because I want to talk about the current situation here with Labour. And News Corp has today revealed the central planks Labour is going to take to the next election. They are education reform, Medicare investment, regional jobs, and putting supermarkets on notice. I spent $81 for one single sack of groceries at Coles today, so I do kind of support that. But Linda, this seems very small target to me. Have they lost the kind of the fire of an early, ambitious kind of government? Are they worried about being pinged on things like the $275 power bill promise? Is this all a bit small target here? And frankly, a bit unambitious given everything that's going on?
Well, look, let's not forget that in this country, you know, the last Prime Minister who was re-elected for a second term was John Howard. And for increasingly large numbers of Australians, that's actually outside their living memory or certainly their voting memory. So this is an important election. It's going to be, if Prime Minister Anthony Albanese wins, historic, and it's also going to be difficult. Let's be really clear about the challenge that he faces to be re-elected for a second term. But again, I think the central theme that whenever I talk to anybody at the moment, people want to hear about is unity. They don't want political opposition for political opposition's sake. And when the Prime Minister talks about the coalition, you know, the coalition of the Liberal National Party and the Greens just opposing every single idea, opposing reforms in the Parliament on housing affordability, opposing reforms to try and bring down power bills, opposing reforms on all kinds of different things that Australians are identifying as important, it is going to make it a hard task for them as well. And let's be clear, Peter Dutton, does he have a plan for majority government? Does he have a plan to win those teal seats? Does he have a plan that allows him to take back a majority of seats? Well, Labor does, of course, have a plan for majority government.
Are they going to get there?
Well, we'll see.
We'll see.
Of course, that's a question. But Peter Dutton doesn't have a plan for those teal seats. Even James Ashby, I think, would agree with that. He doesn't have a plan for those metropolitan seats that he needs to win alongside those other regional seats to form majority government. And you know, he needs to articulate his policy vision, that policy plan, to win back a possible majority government.
Because James Ashby, to me, this sort of feels, and I've said it before on this program and elsewhere, that this feels very much like we are seeing a government not coming out of a big successful first term, but like it's in its third term, and it's kind of got that energy where it's just trying to keep things rolling for a fourth. What do you reckon about this? Is Linda right here that this is a big unifying platform here? Is this what people want?
No, Anthony Albanese will make, set records for the Labor Party, but it won't be by winning a second term in government, that's for certain. Look, I take my hat off to Peter Dutton. I've got a great deal of respect for the man. I do wish and hope that he is our next Prime Minister of this country, because I believe that this is a government that we currently have that have come into Parliament, come into power with zero plan. Their plan was to divide the country with the voice to Parliament. It didn't work. They were relying so heavily on that, and when it fell over, you had a Prime Minister that has spent more time out of the country than in it. It certainly feels that way. And when he's been away, they've lost momentum because there is no talent on the front bench to sort of pick up where Anthony Albanese has left off from. Also, too, what a lot of people don't realise is that despite saying that there was going to be a whole heap of transparency in this new term of government, we've had none. We've had debate stifled or shut down in the Senate, largely because the Greens just back everything that Labor suggests when it comes to shutting that debate down. We have also had any interaction with business leaders or community leaders stifled as well, because every time they meet with a minister in Canberra, they're forced to sign non-disclosure statements or agreements, which stops them from being able to go out and then agitate in the media for the changes, or they've been given a sneak peek of what legislation's coming up. And what's happened is they've been stifled from being able to speak about it because of these non-disclosure agreements. So we've had businesses going backwards at a rapid rate of knots because this government will not listen. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it be the Builders Association to the small retailers. No one has been listened to by this government. They think they know it all, and as a result, that's where they're failing. They're failing the people in the meantime as well by their lack of interest. And they want to go after the supermarkets, but James, the reality is there's so much internally within this government that they could do to cut red tape and reduce the burden on businesses and families, cutting taxes, but instead, no, they haven't done any of that, and they've wanted to blame everybody else bar themselves in the last 2 years of government.
Kristen, you're a former Libertarian candidate. As a Libertarian, and you hear James Ashby talking about cutting red tape, what would be like the top red tape item that you would cut if you could be, telling Albanese what to do?
It would be income tax. We would cut that to 20% flat.
Here.
People get a bonus from work. Absolutely. People get a bonus from work and they get taxed at the marginal rate of 45%. And so they see, just over half of what their company has given them. The government is the biggest bill that we pay at the moment. And, Labor continues to say that they have a plan for our future and all of those kind of things. Want to talk about misinformation? That is misinformation, because there are so many levers that they could pull. They could cut fuel excise tax. They could cut income tax. There's so many, but they just choose not to because they care more about staying in power. Mm-hmm. They care more about staying in power than what is best for the country. So, I don't have high hopes if they get a second term, to be honest, James.
Well, let's hold it right there. Let's hold that thought, because we have got so much more to discuss. We're going to pick up again on this and so much more with my panel. And we're going to talk about Elmer Fudd. Tim Walz's big hunting photo shoot, which didn't quite go according to plan. All that and more after the break. Stick with us.